Good morning. It's Tuesday. It's 11 a.m.-ish. It's summertime. It's mid-70s here. I think I say that every time. So the thing I was thinking about this week is, well, it's two things really. One, I've been going through a pretty serious, well, it feels serious to me, kind of identity crisis kind of thing. Like, I say not that I don't know who I am, but it's kind of like I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how to label myself, and I think I've talked about this, but there's also something that my partner said to me that it feels like it kind of tangents into that, and it makes me question a lot of, I don't know, what is, what isn't, what has been, what it's meant to be. So I guess I'll start with that because that's really what's on my mind. So we were in the car at some point this weekend, I guess, and we were talking about the various things that come up between us and things about transition and her finding her transgenderedness, kind of in midlife, and what she said to me was, "I wish I'd figured it out earlier." Yeah, I wish I'd figured it out earlier, and I guess that could be a kind of a thing that we all say about something in our lives. I wish I'd figured it out earlier. And she has said this before, not a lot, but a few times, and I can completely understand that. The thing that affects me personally, and I guess I make some drama out of it, and I didn't this weekend, but I can definitely feel it, is that if she'd figured it out earlier, we wouldn't have met. And so our life as it is would not exist. And I don't know what that means. I mean, my life coach tells me that if something happens, or how do I know that something is meant to happen? Because that's the way it happened, which is very profound and very simplified. And I try to remember that, but it's hard to hear somebody whom I'm married to or whom I'm in relationship with saying they wish they had changed earlier, because that kind of erases my existence from their life, presumably. I definitely wouldn't have met her if she had transitioned at a young age, because I'm a heterosexual woman, and I wouldn't have been hanging out with trans people. But then it brings it back to who am I? Who would I be without her? And then the bigger thing of who am I in general? And I kind of feel like I'm babbling about this, but I didn't say anything to her about it because she's talked about it before, but it twinges me, it tweaks me, because it erases our relationship if that had happened. Now, it didn't happen, and so it doesn't really matter, but it's this idea of wishing. Now, I understand that her wish is more from a convenience point of view, and I think partly because she knows how much stuff that we've gone through, and she wishes that didn't have to be so. But then she's making an assumption about what I want to go through and what I don't want to go through. But I think it's also selfish in a good way for her, in that she means that, there's a lot of things that she wouldn't have to struggle so much with if she'd gone through this in her 20s as opposed to her 50s. But like I said, it really kind of is it hurt? It just makes me sad because I feel like my relationship with her, our marriage, gets swallowed up in this greater desire to be or to fulfill this transgender journey and to become herself, and how much she wishes was different. And I'm part of that. It's not me personally, but it's our marriage. And so I don't have words for it, but it's definitely there. And she certainly didn't mean it the way that I'm making a story out of it. I know that. And I can respect her wanting to have done it. But I can still feel, I don't know, the selfish part of me thinking about that, I guess. And that goes into, for me, what I've really been struggling with lately is, who am I in this relationship? And I'm recording this without really knowing or remembering exactly what I talked about last week, but I've had a real crisis lately. I'm not sure if it's existential or an identity crisis, but I think I've been living for a lot of years with identifying myself through somebody else. As a wife, first in my first marriage, which was 17 years, and motherhood, which was in there for, I was an active parent up until relatively recently. And so wife and mother have been, other than female, have been my identities. And also heterosexual and white. Of course, that's not going to change, but heterosexual is definitely part of my identity. It's a part of my identity that I think when I was young, I kind of thought about a little bit more, but certainly not for a long time, as to who I am. These are big things that identify me, and they're not ones that I ever gave a lot of thought to. It was just where my life was, and now it feels like those are changing. So, wife. My partner is a transgender woman, so she is not comfortable with me calling her my wife, and I'm not comfortable with her calling her my wife. So we settled on partnership, which is pretty gender neutral and kind of boring, but spouse on occasion, but mostly partner. That's just what it is. I don't have any other name for it. So I've gone from wife to partner. In terms of mothering, which has nothing to do with my partner, but my youngest is turning 21 in December, and while she's living at home part-time, it's the emphasis is on part. She's only here about 3 days a week, maybe 2 days a week. And she certainly doesn't need me much anymore in terms of parenting. So it's the empty nest thing. It's the not being needed as the caretaker so much. And so that's that. That's just a personal thing with me. Heterosexual. This is the big one. So I've always identified as heterosexual. I think when I was much younger, I thought of myself as bisexual, but kind of in theory only. I mean, I've had crushes on women and had some vague sort of experiences in my 20s. But I chose because I thought I had to choose, and so I chose, and I got married, and that's where I'm at. I'm a heterosexual woman, but I'm married to a trans woman, so that term technically doesn't apply to me anymore. And bisexual kind of implies, well, if I was single, I guess it would imply that I would be not having any problem with either gender. But I'm not single, so I can't think of myself as bisexual in my mind. And our marriage is not open, so it's not an open relationship. And so really the only word left, I guess, is other than what I tend to call myself, which is a trans ally or a trans spouse, is queer. And queer is, the LGBT umbrella term for anybody that's not on the bell curve of heterosexual. I'm of a generation where the word kind of always had a nasty connotation, and I can understand the LGBTQ for queer community taking that word back, and think a queer eye for the straight guy and stuff like that. And I don't have a problem with it intellectually, but I struggle with identifying myself that way, and I don't know what it means. And I'm a person that likes to understand what things mean. See all those books behind me? I like to read and understand, and actually, this way, they're over there. They're over there, and the shelf and everything else. And I got tons of books. I'm always trying to learn and understand and grow and evolve, and this is just an area where I'm clueless, and I kind of feel like I'm here by accident, and I'm not sure what to do with it. I feel resistant to. Oh, I don't have resistance. We're scared to look into it too much. I don't know what it. I feel like I keep wanting to say I don't know, and I do know that my life coach is like, that's not a legitimate excuse. You are in the process of figuring it out, or you're not. I think it just terrifies me. I don't feel like I own it. I don't feel like I identify with it. I don't. It's a vague term to me that I've never identified with. So, but here I am in this community, and really intimidated, and not really even out there because I don't know what the hell to do with myself. But it's part of my identity, and my identity, I never really realized like how much I had certain identifying labels about myself, because I've always lived inside them and I've never had to think about them until the last few years. But lately, for some reason, it's really been hitting me much more. I don't know who I am inside this marriage. I don't know who I am. I part of it is that I have a really hard time identifying what my needs are anyway. In the best of cases, I've spent most of my adult life as a mom and wife, and I've put everybody else's needs in front of me because that's what I've done. And that's just on me. And it's on me that I haven't taken responsibility for figuring out who I am. But then I didn't ever think that I would get to my 50s and be faced with something like this. That I feel like I don't have any control over, other than whether I stay or go. And that feels really dramatic. So I'm kind of forced to figure out who I am within this, and since I've spent my entire life being identified by other people, I now have to I have to do it myself, and I don't know how. Anyway, so yeah, it's felt a little, I don't know if I'm having an identity crisis or an existential crisis. What does it all mean? Clara's comment about wishing she had changed earlier, like I said, I've heard her say that before. And I've always had this twinge of, well, what about us? Do you wish that didn't exist? And I know I like to make things about me, so I'm being a little bit of a drama queen, but I understand that she's talking about her life. But I also know her well enough to know that she's thinking about us too. Not that she doesn't love me, but she knows that it's been hard. And yeah. But I don't like her doing that. I don't like her thinking that if she had figured it out earlier, things would be easier for me. If she wished she'd figured it out earlier, for her, I'm okay with that. Nonetheless, it still tweaks either way. And yet, it didn't happen that way because this is what did happen. And so there's got to be some, if you believe in this stuff, meaning and growth within the choices that we have made and the decisions we've made and how we made them. And the timing on those decisions. And I am sorry if I'm rambling today. These are just things that have really been on my mind, and I don't know how to kind of wrap my head around these new labels. I also have another label, which is totally unrelated to this, is that people say I'm an artist. I do art. I do digital art primarily. I do collage, which is hence all the magazines and artwork back there, and I have stickers and washi tape. There's a whole wall of washi tape in front of me, and planners and iPads and computers and stuff like that. But I have a really hard time with the word artist. And that's a whole nother story, which I won't get into because it's not really in this venue. But so it's another identity part that I'm struggling with, along with our marriage and the identity of our marriage. And is it even marriage? Is it a partnership? It doesn't feel like a marriage anymore, to be honest. Well, it doesn't feel like a marriage in the traditional way. And I think we've been thinking about how to redefine that for ourselves, and I don't know where we're going with it. But again, it's all these identities that we carry around with us. Certainly ones that I've carried around. And there's even bigger general ones that we have, right? You know, race and where we live and education, and then there's identities that people put on us that we accept or don't accept or whatever. But these ones for me have been really heavy, and I keep calling it kind of an existential crisis because it's been really emotional for me to, who am I? Okay, so let me put it this way. One of the really things that came to my mind recently as I was writing about this was that it's more scary, or I should say less scary, it would be less scary to leave than it would be to define myself as a partner with Clara. In other words, it would be easier just to quit, or to walk away, or to get divorced, than it is to identify myself and own this new role that I have. And that in and of itself scared me because I don't have any interest in getting divorced. I have no interest in not being there, but the fact that I realized that it would be easier, or it was less scary than staying, really kind of shook me. It was like, wow, that's I mean, divorce is scary in and of itself. I don't have a job that could support myself or anything like that. But the idea of identifying myself as the partner of a trans woman, like to really own that, intellectually it's been in my head for a few years, but to really take that in, the emotion of that in, and see who I am. Every once in a while I get this glimpse of myself from 5,000 feet, as it were, and I don't recognize myself. I'm married to a woman. I'm in this relationship with a trans woman. Who is that person? Wow, she must be really sure of herself, and that's amazing. And I'm like, wow, that's me. That's fucking me, and I'm so not as with it as sometimes I think people think. Not that I'm falling apart either, but I just don't feel like I really have taken it into my heart, and I become very emotional about it when I really start exploring it. And I'm a person that dives in and wants to figure out that identity, wants to figure out who I am. That's been a big goal in my life, always, is to grow and evolve and stuff like that. I just didn't expect quite the tidal wave of change that's been coming along for a few years and now is really hitting me on a personal level. And as I struggle with who I am on that deeper level, or how other people see me, or owning it. I guess I just don't own it. So I'm sorry the screen keeps going dark. My screensaver kicks in. So I've talked way too long here about things that I'm rambling on about, so I'm going to stop. Have a great week, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.